Hello and welcome to Tag Tuesday, in which I present the top 10 non-fiction books tag. This tag was created by Lukas at Totally Pretentious, who tagged me. See the link to his video below. These are not my top 10 favourite non-fiction books. I have already published my top 10 favourite biographies, my top 5 books to save from the flames, and my top 10 favourite authors, some of whom were non-fiction writers. When I saw that Lukas had tagged me to do this tag, my immediate reaction was, oh no, now I'll have to think. And Thomas Edison said there is no expedient to which a man will not go to avoid the labour of thinking. So it got me thinking and checking my bookshelves for some interesting, informative and intellectually stimulating non-fiction books that in one way or another have provoked me to think about something. These books are not presented in terms of ranking, but it is appropriate to begin with a work by Edward de Bono, who has done more than anyone to promote the concept of thinking as a deliberate act. His concept of lateral thinking has influenced governments and major companies the world over. But it is his brilliant book called Six Thinking Hats that has provided me with workable concepts that I've actually used. The deliberate thinking techniques contained in this superb book will enable anyone to tackle any problem in a consistent and reliable way. The basic technique is simplicity itself, but requires a disciplined approach and experience to obtain the maximum value from the technique. Put on a white hat for neutrality to obtain facts and figures. Put on a red hat to gain an emotional viewpoint, to see how you feel about the situation. Put on a black hat for a critical viewpoint, to examine what is wrong with the issue at hand. Put on a yellow hat for a sunny optimism. This enables speculation and a positive viewpoint. Put on a green hat for a wealth of creative ideas. Utilize lateral thinking to generate new ideas. And then put on a blue hat to give yourself a detached viewpoint. This provides control of the other hats and an organised structure to the thinking process. The second non-fiction book I want to discuss is by Dale Carnegie, and no, I do not mean How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I gained absolutely nothing from. The book of his that has been of tremendous value and from which I have obtained invaluable and practical advice is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. The book is divided into 10 parts, and each part is full of practical and useful instruction and information. Part 1 advises us to live in day-tight compartments, to forget the failures of the past and the worries of the future, and to concentrate with all our energies on doing the best we can with what we have to do today. In Part 2, Carnegie tells us how to analyse and solve our worry problems. In Part 3, he provides practical techniques on how to break the worry habit. In Part 4, he outlines 7 ways to cultivate a mental attitude that will bring us peace and happiness. In Part 5, he expounds the golden rule for conquering worry. In Part 6, he explains how to keep from worrying about criticism. In Part 7, he promotes 6 ways to prevent fatigue and to keep our energy levels high. In Part 8, he tells us how to find the kind of work in which we may be happy and successful. In Part 9, he explains how to lessen our financial worries. And in Part 10, he presents 32 real-life stories from people who tell how they conquered worry. The third non-fiction book I want to talk about is The Consolations of Philosophy by Alain de Botton. Botton has taken 6 common problems of modern life and has drawn on the wisdom of 6 key philosophers to provide, if not answers, then at least consolations in the midst of our woes. So he presents Socrates on the problem of unpopularity, Epicurus on the problem of not having enough money, Seneca on the problem of frustration, Montaigne on the problem of inadequacy, Schopenhauer on having a broken heart, and Nietzsche on difficulties. The 4th non-fiction book is Churchill's Black Dog and Other Phenomena of the Human Mind by Anthony Storr. The leading essay in this book of 14 essays by a noted psychiatrist is a study on Churchill's depressive temperament and of how it enabled him to inspire a nation when its back was up against the wall. Storr writes, like other men, he had imperfections and flaws. Without these disadvantages, he would have been a happier, more ordinary, better balanced and lesser human being. But had he been a stable and equable man, he could never have inspired the nation. It was because all his life he had conducted a battle with his own despair that he could convey to others that despair can be overcome. Other essays in this scintillating work include Kafka's sense of identity, Isaac Newton, C.P. Snow, Othello and the psychology of sexual jealousy, aspects of adult development, psychoanalysis and creativity, intimations of mystery, why psychoanalysis is not a science, the psychology of symbols, sanity is true genius, why human beings become violent, and psychiatric responsibility in the open society. Every one of these essays provides food for thought. Another hero of mine is Abraham Lincoln. And as well as having read several biographies of Lincoln, I have a fascinating work called Lincoln's Melancholy. How Depression Challenged a President and Fueled His Greatness by Joshua Wolf Shenk. Shenk has produced a truly scintillating and groundbreaking biography of Lincoln's inner life. Lincoln's Melancholy is a fascinating psychological study of depression and of how Lincoln not only coped with this mental state but also surmounted it to develop such strength of character and greatness of heart that his sufferings enabled him to lead the American nation effectively during its greatest turmoil. In 10 superb chapters, Shenk explores the inner life of Lincoln and throws new light on Lincoln and his legacy, and also the depths from which he drew his inspiration. Chapter 1, The Community Said He Was Crazy. Chapter 2, A Fearful Gift. Chapter 3, I Am Now the Most Miserable Man Living. Chapter 4, A Self-Made Man. Chapter 5, A Misfortune, Not a Fault. Chapter 6, The Reign of Reason. Chapter 7, The Vents of My Moods and Gloom. Chapter 8, Its Precise Shape and Colour. Chapter 9, The Fiery Trial Through Which We Pass. And Chapter 10, Comes Wisdom to Us. The 6th non-fiction book is Boswell's Presumptuous Task by Adam Sisman. Sisman provides a fascinating and original account of Boswell's 7-year struggle to write the life of Johnson following Johnson's death in 1784. At the time, Boswell was trying and failing to make his mark in the world. Beset by anxieties about money and about his desperately ill wife, distracted by drinking and philandering, torn between his responsibilities as a Scots laird and the lure of London, tormented by rival biographers, often embarrassed, humiliated or depressed. Many a time I thought of giving it up, he confessed, when the work was almost finished. Sisman's intellectually exhilarating work unpicks the life of Johnson. Here is a dazzling exploration of the interplay between biography and autobiography, between reputation and character, between art and authenticity, between literature and life, and a dramatic unfolding of the struggle for mastery between biographer and subject. Boswell's Presumptuous task shows movingly how a man who failed in almost everything else came to write one of the greatest biographies, the triumphant legacy of a man with a great heart. The chapter headings of Sisman's book are instructional and reveal the thematic approach he has taken in exploring Boswell's presumptuous task. 1. Immaturity. 2. Forwardness. 3. Subordination. 4. Independence. 5. Collaboration. 6. Anger. 7. Discretion. 8. Application. 9. Rivalry. 10. Bereavement. 11. Humiliation. 12. Struggle. 13. Despair. And 14. Posterity. The seventh book is a Jane Austen education. How 6 books taught me about love, friendship and the things that really matter, by William Deresiewicz. A Jane Austen education is an eloquent memoir of a young man's life transformed by literature. In reading Jane Austen's novels, he found life lessons in their pages. He discovered that her books are not only about education, but are an education in themselves. So from Emma he learned about everyday matters, from those little things that happen hour by hour, to the people in your life, what your nephew said, what your friend heard, what your neighbour did. That is what the fabric of our years really consists of. That is what life is really about. From Pride and Prejudice he learned about growing up, that you aren't born perfect. You are born with a whole novel's worth of errors ahead of you. But making mistakes is the only way to grow up. Being right might get you a pat on the head, but being wrong can help you find out who you really are. From Northanger Abbey he learned that you have to learn how to learn, that you have to stay awake and don't take things for granted. By renouncing certainty and cynicism, by opening yourself to new experiences, you can turn your life into an adventure that will never end. From Mansfield Parr he learned about being good, that being entertained is not the same as being happy. Perpetual amusement leads only to the perpetual threat of boredom. He discovered that the keys to true happiness lie elsewhere. From Persuasion he learned about true friends, that you need to be honest with your friends. Unconditional acceptance is not real friendship. A true friend wants you to be happy, but being happy and feeling good about yourself are not the same thing. A true friend points out your mistakes, even at the risk of losing your friendship. From Sense and Sensibility he learned about falling in love, that love is about growing up, not staying young. It means a never-ending clash of opinions and perspectives. A true lover is someone who is different from you and is willing to challenge you. If your lover is already just like you, then neither one of you has anywhere to go. The 8th book is Early Victorian Novelists by David Cecil. These essays in evaluation of 7 early Victorian novelists are filled with penetrating and original criticism. Cecil discusses his 7 subjects from the standpoint of aesthetic criticism. These essays are absorbing, scintillating and exciting because Cecil involves us in the thrill of discovery. He writes not only persuasively but also brilliantly. His judgments of each writer's qualities and shortcomings are both profound and sound. We know that we can trust that his conclusions are right. Early Victorian Novelist is a stimulating and thought-provoking work that is shrewd, humorous, sympathetic, lucid and revealing. Cecil's knowledge and understanding of each of his subjects is apparent on every page of this wise work, written with Cecil's own literary finesse and artistry that are a constant enchantment. His 7 subjects are 1. Charles Dickens, 2. William Makepeace Thackeray, 3. Charlotte Bronte, 4. Emily Bronte, 5. Mrs. Gaskell, 6. Anthony Trollope, and 7. George Eliot. The 9th book is Aspects of the Novel by E.M. Forster. The essays in this book were originally given as lectures. They are thus conversational in tone and are laced through with Forster's habitual wit, wisdom and freshness of approach. He decided to discard the weighty historical view of tendencies, influences and periods, and instead we are to imagine all novelists at work together in a circular room. Having freed himself from the cumbersome apparatus that characterized literary criticism in the past, Forster embarks on a scintillating series of lectures which he purposely called Aspects because of the vagueness of the term, which left him maximum freedom to present his material in new and refreshing ways. The aspects he chose were 7 in number, and they are 1. The story, 2. People, 3. The plot, 4. Fantasy, 5. Prophecy, 6. Pattern, and 7. Rhythm. Through these 7 aspects, Forster ranged over the whole spectrum of literature and provided brilliant insights and thought-provoking comments which make for intellectually scintillating reading. And the 10th and final non-fiction book is The 7 Basic Plots: Why We Tell Stories by Christopher Booker. Forster's Aspects of the Novel is just 187 pages long, but The 7 Basic Plots is 805 pages long, and reading it you would not want it to be a single page shorter. It is a work of sheer brilliance and a labour of love that took Booker 10 years to investigate and to write. This is truly a seminal work, which is enormous in its scope and compass and profound in its penetration of the archetypal roots of human consciousness and imagination. The book is divided into 4 parts. Part 1, the 7 gateways to the underworld. Part 2, the complete happy ending. Part 3, missing the mark. And Part 4, why we tell stories. Part 1 explores the 7 basic plots. 1, overcoming the monster. 2, rags to riches. 3, the quest. 4, voyage and return. 5, comedy. 6, tragedy. And 7, rebirth. When I tell you that apart from the general index there are 5 pages devoted exclusively to an index of stories quoted, you will appreciate the scope and magnitude of this work. While compiling this list of 10 intellectually stimulating non-fiction books, I regretted that I could not insert lengthy quotes to illustrate the brilliance of each work, but if I had done so, this video would have reached Jason length proportions. And now, here's a quick recap, and I'll be back soon with another BookTube video.